We would like to welcome today's speaker, Peter Wilson. He's a local architect and interior designer who has specialized in a variety of commercial endeavors, including senior living, hospitality, retail, workplace, and mixed-use projects. He has worked for public, nonprofit, and private clients. He has worked in large and small design firms across the country, as well as a smattering of international projects. He leads a design firm now, which is called the Ateri Group. In the past 15 years, he has hired and supervised several of our program's graduates. Peter, welcome, and thanks again for accepting our invitation to share your thoughts on this on this important topic.
Well, thank you very much, Mohammed, and thank you for the school to offer this opportunity to touch base with students, those starting out, and others on the cusp of developing their thesis. I hope that we can share a lot of innovative and just thought-provoking topics. I also understand and hope that there are some recent graduates staying connected to the school and welcomed also. Hopefully many of you listening in already know about me from meetings, past crits, or general reputation. Briefly, hello again, my name is Peter Wilson, and I'm an architect who has spent the last 3 decades, and I'm dating myself, working in this great profession of design in a variety of types, styles, budgets, and scopes. I wanted to offer this presentation and discussion after taking part in several design crits at Morgan over the last several years, as well as my own past experience teaching at Morgan or at Anne Arundel Community College's School of Architecture and Design. Again, to reiterate today's topic, what is interior architecture versus interior design? And moreover, why should an architectural student or anyone else for that matter care about the difference? I noticed a lot on many student projects, albeit super in research and conceptual design, miss opportunities to express their vision completely, to understand the total built environment by marrying both exterior shapes, sizes, aesthetics, and the like with the interior of the building. Not to mention possibly acknowledging the presumptive longstanding and dated distinction that men dominate the architecture world while women are consigned to the frivolous interiors. So that is to say, should the interior development of a project be given the due consideration and design attention as its exteriors? So I insert the requisite no duh here, but more formally, I wanted to put that out as sort of a greater question. But looking at this fabulous example, can you imagine what it's like inside? To achieve the desired exterior cool design statement, is shaking up the norm from the street level impact worth it? And if so, what are the implications of the spaces and the people inside of this building? Now, granted, with Big's fabulous project in New York City, you can see that it really makes a statement. But can you imagine being around a sloped wall or any of the other spaces? It begs the question. This past May, and in the publication of AIA architect, Annie Chu of Los Angeles is quoted, "The inside of a building is so much more than the collection of finishes." And that is truly an understatement. I'm not just talking about what conventionally we understand as quote unquote interior design. Validly, that is a well and good field of design and investigation. But in a school of architecture, it's typical that the connotation of interiors does not carry the full respect and strength that it deserves. Usually, fellow architects and designers preliminarily and primarily focus on the exterior building aspects and influences of the site itself or its surrounding context, or even about massing, forms, fenestration, materials, roof lines, and the like. I noticed that little time is dedicated, and if any time is dedicated at all and spent, it's reluctantly at best, to develop the inside of a building project. I'm talking far more than the obligatory spaces and tasks outlined in a course syllabus or requirements list, but rather when one truly delves into how you design and how your design vision operates on a human scale, can the full design be realized. So let's take our first steps into define this topic head on in that all well too familiar way of doing it, the internet. So with this screenshot, simple Google search, interior architecture versus interior design, you get a smattering of things, primarily from the United States or Canada, that give a very loose explanation and definition. Maybe there's a touch base of interior design programs, but they really don't delve into the fundamental difference. So conventionally speaking, quote unquote, interior architecture is a subject rather than a distinct profession. The term architect is a protected title like a doctor, and it can't be used by just anybody without the specific academic or tenure qualifications and accreditations. A humbling side note, we all in this presentation would love to have architects as honored and lauded as doctors, but we just don't have the right lobbying power as the medical field to claim higher financial glory. But that's a discussion for another day. There is a confusion out there frequently seen even within our field when somebody might call themselves or be called a junior architect or an architectural designer. Do titles really matter? And lately, interior designers worldwide have tried to take over the title of designer, which offended many young professionals because they were not interior designers, but they were designers. And what was the difference? So suddenly you see that clash of what interior designers versus young architectural designers were, started to become a problem. But who cares, right? What's the big deal, or what's the difference? An interior designer, quote unquote, on the other hand, is somebody who focuses on the interiors of a space, whether it be the aesthetics, the function, or more. Occasionally, they work hand in hand with architects, if allowed and if the project can afford. Frequently, they separately supplement the design process or scope of work if there is no substantial alteration to the building. What quickly comes to mind are interior renovations, adaptive reuse of older buildings, and the ubiquitous term in the industry of tenant improvement, which is used primarily in the commercial workplace and real estate settings. And if you're not familiar with that term, that's when a separate space or office suite in a larger building, like a downtown building or even a suburban shopping center, has retail tenants who customize an interior area to suit their specific needs of operation and visual preference. So let's look at some examples of what an interior architect can do and influence. If we think about the detailing, that's where things really shine. Many interior designers cannot accomplish what is needed to make their vision a reality and rely on architects or even the contractor to just work it out, the logistics and the details. One of the great things that I love about interior architecture is an ability to craft a rendering like this one is. And believe it or not, that was done before this built project. And you can see, obviously, how that skill can truly be to resonate with clients and contractors, because the rendering looks very much like the final product. Or on the left-hand side, you can see a conference center space that was done within a hotel. It was a complete redo down to the concrete sub, and all of these details, if you can imagine the simplicity of these wood panels or the light fixtures or even the carpets, were truly detailed by an architect with the concept being shared by an interior designer. And it needed that bridging of the interior architect to bring it all together. The term interior architecture increasingly is used to reflect the expanded scope and responsibility of area-specific architects, largely thanks to the improvements of design technology, CAD, Revit, 3D rendering programs, and expanded interior design education, like addressing complex spatial design aspects and how to manage, manipulate, and even wield those aspects in an effective, attractive, and cost-effective manner. These are all subjective terms, by the way, and we need to be aware of that. Yet all of them are essential regardless of which concentration pursuit is chosen. It is, however, misleading to imply that an interior designer can do the same work as an interior architect. Though many interior design degree courses now teach students about structure, systems, the technical elements of buildings, they are not as comprehensive as national architectural programs. So I think it's appropriate to talk about interiors on an architectural program level. Additionally, some architects think they can just do it all and they don't need a separate interior designer because they're just going to take care of it, which begins to further blur the line between architecture and interior design. And that can cut both ways, however. I recall my own experience that brought me to this more intensive study and investigation of interiors decades ago. I have a couple of examples. One is, I remember one of my first projects out of graduate school, and I have a master's in architecture, so there was no concentration of interiors back then. And I worked for a firm that actually did both. And I remember my first project was for a developer's office. And I thought it was really cool to introduce, now this is not the project, this is not mine. This is just an example. I thought it was really cool to show glass block. And I was so proud of myself as an architect to use this new material. And this old curmudgeon head of the development office almost lambasted me, saying, it's taken me 40 years to get rid of the 1950s glass block and the avocado appliances, and here you are trying to reintroduce it as a new material. What are you thinking? But it did have its heyday. So think about interiors actually can be more dated than the exterior of a building. There's another example I just want to share with you, which I'm sure many professionals have a problem with, is, gosh, the interior designers mucked up my architecture with busy floral prints, tchotchkes, and over-the-top colors. And now I can't include it in my portfolio, which did happen. This is actually a project of mine that won an award and was published in Richmond, Virginia, for being so perfect for their setting. And every time I look at it, I go, wow, that is just a bunch of stuff that I can't even begin to talk about. I'm not disliking it, but at the same time, it muddies the waters. And then there's a third option I talk about, which is to include this wonderful project from Ando in Japan, where an architect could actually say, well, why again do we need to include interior designers or interior architecture when we can just do it ourselves? But I think about the glorious Japanese architects, Louis Kahn and Le Corbusier, not from Japan, intellectually lauded aside, these spaces that they've created evoke more of the controversial brutalist design style and not actually the subtle nuances of inhabiting a space. More local colleagues have spouted the same rhetoric to me. I want to point out, though, that true simplicity and detailing is far more difficult to achieve than presumed, and if done well, and is not just a matter of, well, I just want it to be simple, and so I didn't even bother designing it. Absence of design is not the same thing as a simplistic design. So if you look at this Ando project, can you imagine how truly coordinated that architecture needed to be so that the post-tension seams of these concrete panels aligned with the bottom of the cross and the windows to the side? That's not happenstance, that's real. and that the center of the cross at the end of this church matched the center line of the aisles that the pews created. And the pattern of the post-tension cables is not happenstance. That's just simplicity. It's gorgeous. This example shows how interior architecture can be simple without being dismissive of interiors. Or let's talk about this complex interior design that complements the overall exterior architecture, and that can be a positive goal. If we consider this example, this is talking about taking a more contemporary workplace environment and working within a new building, though you can see older buildings in the distance, how these new elements of frameless glass walls and the technology of that, operating doors, a floating ceiling, how do you include a reception desk? All of that works within a contemporary space. And these are all important considerations for how interior architecture detailing truly helps enhance the exterior. So how is someone to feel or move inside of these spaces beyond an academic analysis? We certainly can enjoy any space for a period of time, but what about the longevity of that use and that appreciation? I think about how we exist in today's COVID world, where we are being forced to exist within confined and familiar interior spaces. Many people's ability or even their luxury of inhabiting a variety of spaces is now limited. Are we happy to exist within a concrete bunker, day in, day out, no matter how beautiful it was? Or think more personally, how do you feel in your own home or room? The human experience thrives on being able to inhabit a variety of spaces daily. Or consider even the infamous Frank Lloyd Wright, who was famed for believing that his perfect human scale and size was the right scale model, although he only reached 5'7". That means anyone who dares to stand taller than he must bend down awkwardly to get through a door. And that experience happened to me when I went to several of his projects in Illinois, and I stand 6'5", and I had to literally bend down every single time to get through a door. All because design had to govern over the human form. Does that make sense in nowadays world? To complicate matters, the term of interior decorator, which furthermore muddies the understanding and divisions of responsibility, garners even more confusion when discussing who is doing what. Quickly, an interior decorator tends to be those people who concentrate primarily and are concerned primarily with the aesthetic qualities of a space and the features therein. They are involved with the purely decorative artistic side of design and not with the science, function, or pragmatics of elements within the space. They thrive on the private residential world for the most part, since those have far less code implications to govern or limit their design expression. In addition, in an attempt to clarify matters further, decorators tend to be themselves or they collaborate with artisans and craftsmen and women. A quick example of that can be seen in accent walls. So if you look at this sketch, this is a fairly simple space that tried to be enhanced by interior decorators creating 2 feature walls. And did it really affect the space? Does it really work? Does it really not work? Who knows? But I put that out there. So what does this all mean in the pursuit of comprehensive architectural capital D design? Considering that most architectural degree programs in the States give little, if any, attention to crafting interior of spaces, whether it be initial renderings or the built project examination. What thoroughly defines an interior space of design? So ask yourself, what attracted you to the field of architecture in the first place? Did you feel a sense of a space, or was it purely an intellectual or scientific response to the building's outdoor experience? Most programs remain focused on developing the exterior partie, and I love that term. Don't you love that term? That is odd, since it is a known statistic from the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, that about 87 to 90% of the human experience in a non-third world culture is within a building or a space, since solar and temperature protection is critical. In other climates, that obviously changes. But if we are experiencing 87 to 90% of our existence inside a building, why does a conventional designer or architect disregard the inside? I look at this example, which is this wonderful project from Francis Kere in Burkina Faso, which really is a wonderful example of how the interior can truly define and enhance in that climate through these louvers, although there's no glazing there, but you can see how wonderful the textures and the sunlight and the shadowing cast that style throughout the building. Our perception of a built environment relies on our ability to relate to the inside of buildings visually, physically, tactily, acoustically, audibly. Sorry, we haven't gotten to taste yet, but that's another story. Even in a wake of growing sustainability as aspects of design, somehow interiors attention is deemed less interesting and often consigned to the realm of what's considered a paint and powder design response. We avoid and downplay these valid design opportunities and solution methodologies. Yes, there is a lead CI, which is commercial interiors, along with a lead BD plus C, which is building design and construction. But those distinctions are muddying and fading as well. So it's incumbent upon the schools to continue to champion that distinction. Whereas one may be concerned on one hand with decor, soft furnishings, and small-scale projects, on the other, we may be more concerned with larger projects involving technical as well as aesthetic aspects to feature our skills. Don't you think it's valuable to combine those two, though? So, to the core of this presentation, I respectfully would challenge that it is not only incumbent for design projects to consider, investigate, and develop the interior spaces at a similar level as the exteriors. I think it's also professionally our responsibility to do so. Not only when someone is in school, but even more so when we enter the profession. Routinely in the working world, we are confronted with practical interior related constraints and aspects. Clients, you know, those important people, frequently focus on their personal and operational requirements and how a design building satisfies those needs on the inside. Let us not forget, either with overall exterior or interior architecture, the client actually is the final arbiter of what is needed, albeit complemented by their sage design team partners. But in the end, let's remember who pays for it. I remember a professor in my school who thought so strongly that a certain toilet needed to be included in their project, and the client said, no, I just can't afford it, that the architect actually paid for that toilet. I think that takes design arrogance a little bit to the extreme. Let's look at this example. Looking at this, do you think this design responds to everyone's initial design vision? What aspect dominates? The architecture or the interiors? Do they work together simultaneously and seamlessly? Consider also these design topics and how they influence this project, or any project as it so be. Space and scale of spaces. Is a space too small? Is it too large? What are the area aspects? i.e., that's what I mean, is the space too long and narrow and it looks and feels like a bowling alley? Or is it too wide and there's a whole bunch of wasted space? What are the basic space needs for any building? From the inside, can one see into a space from above or below? Clients and teachers want to know. I frequently see students and professionals alike arbitrarily infilling a defined building outline just to blindly define a void. There are little considerations to the interconnectivity and sizes of those spaces. An example I want to bring to our attention is a classic example from a student where stairs and public toilets in a floor plan are sized either the size of a small country or a broom closet, an outhouse. Everybody admits to the logical need for circulation in toilets, right? And in a public building especially, to see it generically thrown away and not considered is a pity. And better yet, that funky opportunity that I'm sure many of us have seen, where a non-square or traditionally shaped exterior forces acute angles to be included on the inside, which nobody can inhabit and nobody can clean and nobody can, exist with that. But those appear frequently. If we look at this example, respectfully uncredited, let's analyze very briefly what we see. It's a generic 85 by 85 square building, but there's some really distinctive errors here, which speak to me of innocence. That means the person did not really give it the time and consideration to understand the inside. Okay, let's have this all wrapped with exterior glass, except where we don't need glass. If you look on the right side, you see 2 multi-stall bathrooms, but there's only a 5-foot space between the doors. Well, can you imagine people coming in and out at the same time? There's a bottleneck and there's a clash. And the views into the bathroom are obvious. There's no modesty. Let's talk about entering the building. Well, in the bottom side, you see the main entry. 8 foot away from that main entry, there's a column. Where was the coordination? Where was the acknowledgement that structure and interiors needed to support the human experience? The center aspect of this design is a circular open well in the middle, which is about 32 feet in diameter, nominally 1/3 of the width of the entire building, and it takes over, it's oversized. And then you wrap it with some stairs. Well, the problem on the left side where you hit one landing and the right side where you hit another landing, there are bottlenecks when people are trying to walk around that. There's little articulation and consideration revealed there. Why are there 2 elevators opposite sides of the building? Why is there not a door leading from the stairway, emergency stairways, out to egress in emergency? You have to go back into the building to go out again. And then my favorite part is that upper left-hand corner storage room gets fabulous real estate with windows. And why would a storage room be given such powerful space? People know about the laudable corner office. But so I just wanted to analyze a couple of these aspects. Do these gestures and design speak more to I didn't know and I didn't even think about it? Or was it I just didn't have time to reflect that level of interior design in my project before the deadline, and so I just had to throw in some things? You all know what I'm talking about. That happens a lot. And I'm asking respectfully that we consider due time to address not only the exterior concept and partie, but the interior. Let's also talk about some pragmatics. Circulation and access. I'm talking about more than just a dead-end corridor, which is a space planning nightmare. Let's talk about life safety and codes, stairs, egress, the like. Acknowledging the critical topic of the American with Disabilities Act, ADA, or universal design as a broad introduction, but also the primary awareness of pragmatic constraints that either ruin one's design or potentially enhance it. This is talking about respectful design for everybody. I know I might be throwing poison into a student level discussion, but future realities are unavoidable even before stepping into the work world. And don't fear, I'm not advocating or saying that each student needs to be fluent with this level of the technical world, but rather I think it's a good idea for everybody at a school to respect and be aware of this design aspect before you get into the working world. Program, end user functions. That's important in terms of deliveries and removals, you know, the practical stuff of daily living. Do you want to have one's trash come out of the building while you're walking into the building? And if you look at this example, you can say, yeah, that just didn't get thought through. But that's a reality. Trash removal, janitorial surfaces, loading docks, the back door. Back doors are really important as much as front doors. Lighting, natural versus artificial, pragmatic versus decorative, shadows and patterns. If you remember Louis Kahn's wonderful quote, that natural light never knew its beauty until it hit the surface of a building, that certainly can be related and applied to the interior as well. How can sunlight inform or penetrate a huge floor plate? And don't think just a simple skylight in a multi-story building is going to solve all the sins. Think about clear stories or clerestories or other means of fenestration. In this example, you can see vision glass. You can see tempered glass with the cowl walls, clear story windows. You can see conventional ceiling light in the distance. You can see pendant lights. So lighting becomes truly an element that sparkles and informs this design 24/7. Views into a building through windows mean that there are also views out of the building. How are those handled? Has anybody truly asked or considered views in a building? How does light filter into a space? Direct, indirect, frosted, artificial, balancing daylight and nighttime aspects. Another consideration can be construction sequencing, schedules, and viability. Getting upstairs or even in an elevator, a huge design element can be a cluster. And something, that kind of realization after the fact is a killer. And that happens more than one would want to consider. Oh, we have a huge pre-manufactured element and we can't get it up a building. Think about a grand piano. Many of you have had programs where you have concert halls on upper levels. How are you getting that grand piano up there? Think also, please, about materials, colors, textures, patterns, and the like. How do they define or enhance a space? Think also about furniture, artwork, window treatment, plant material, and the like. Little tongue-in-cheek, I love this. This is an image from Pixar's The Incredibles. And this is supposed to be an office. It could be a call center, it could be an insurance agency, it could be a government space with cubicles. Well, other than the joke of the scale of the space, that there's only one column informing it, the irony of that one column sitting and clashing with somebody's workspace means to me that the base building architect and the interior people did not coordinate. The benefit of an interior architect is constantly thinking about those systems from the very beginning. Wayfinding signage also is an important design element. It doesn't have to be thought of too much by architects, but it should be considered. Budgets are an important factor. And believe it or not, feng shui, if you're familiar with that design philosophy, can help and inform, but it doesn't have to. In summary, I am not advocating that architectural students deep dive into interior detailing, coordination, and those industry-specific aspects of interior design for their projects too much. No, I am promoting, on the other hand, giving due consideration, time, and effort to your projects and acknowledging the importance to more than a skin and shape of the building. I understand there is a small section offered at the undergraduate level here at Morgan. What about those who enter the graduate level and miss it? Is it a missed opportunity that they cannot get back? As you hopefully can imagine, it would be logical and to thoroughly introduce interiors to many levels. And introductory sections or given limited time doesn't suffice. It might be beneficial to have a more comprehensive opportunity to address interior design aspects at the graduate level so that you can fully have time to investigate what we've talked about today. Trying to cover it all in an isolated one time within a studio semester is hard to do and does not reflect the significance of the project and the topic. Interior architecture is the balancing of the art and science of designing an interior space, taking into account all elements of the building. It is logical and inevitable that some of you will choose to pursue this type of design deliberately, or you just might find yourself specializing in it because of practical matters. Not everyone has the luxury or the luck to participate and partake in ground-up design projects, so renovations from within are inevitable. Besides, certain areas of the world are perilously close to overbuilt landscapes now, and I hope many people can acknowledge that. Embracing an expanded level of complete human-centered design processes to address building environments early in one's study can be beneficial for future employment and intellectual pursuits. The subtle skills of a seasoned architect, including both exterior and interior at any level, will present superior designs and will win the day. Thank you very much for your attention in this regard, and we look forward to responding to questions.